So I've always wanted to visit Florida. It's something that's always been on my mind. I guess maybe ever since watching Scarface. What I didn't expect though is that when I finally do come out here, the weather would be like this. Not exactly ideal, but at the same time, things could be a lot worse, right? So this is somewhere in Florida. I think I'm in Miami, maybe Sunny Isles. I'm not too sure. What I do know is I found the beach. I found some buildings, good enough for a drone flight and good enough for an intro where I tell you guys what's going on. And what's going on is I'm here for 2 or 3 days, as per usual, just to play some poker. I think the first stop and the main one is gonna be at Seminole Hard Rock Casino, a place I've never been to before, but apparently they're holding some big tournament series. Everyone's there, and so, you know, naturally the cash games are too. And I've heard they've been running 10-25, which is not something you see a lot, at least in public casinos. So of course, I'm gonna try to jump in there and bring you guys along for the ride. Tomorrow, which is gonna be the next video, I think we're going to Coconut Creek, some other popular, who cares? Anyway, all you need to know is there's a lot of poker coming up. Tonight is 10-25. Tomorrow, whatever they have at Coconut Creek. And that's all I gotta say. Let's get to the poker room. All right, everyone, here we are playing 10-25 No Limit, which later included a $50 automatic straddle. Quite the sizable game, at least for me, so I decided to buy in for $15,000. Not long after starting the game, I looked down at a very welcome sight, Pocket Kings on the button. The player first to act makes it 50. I'm not sure if that was a straddle or a raise, but either way, I make it 200. And then we get some very good news from the small blind when he announces a raise to $800. He started the hand with around 5,000, so of course when action folds back to me, I put in another raise, 1,000 on top, 1,800 total, and now the ball is back in his court. Fingers crossed that he doesn't fold, and he doesn't, but instead announces all in. Obviously a non-decision for me, and just like that, we're starting off the session with a $10,000 pot. The board runs out all low cards, which looks pretty good to me, and my opponent shows Ace King. So off to a great start here at Hard Rock. Shortly after, I get dealt Queen Jack in early position. Not the best hand ever, but both my cards have letters on them, so I race to 75 and get called by the button and big blind. The flop is nothing exciting, King 6-3 with a flush draw. Big blind checks and I decide to place another bet since, you know, I could have some stuff on this board. However, the button calls behind me and then the big blind calls as well, so I'm pretty much done with it until the ace of diamonds comes on the turn. This is probably the only card where I think continuing to bluff makes sense. Neither of these guys should have an ace too often, and the fact that I'm continuing to bet against two people should look fairly strong. So when the big blind checks, I fire $275 into the middle. The button thinks for a bit and folds, and then the big blind quickly does the same. So bad hand, but good result. In the next one, there's a limp from early position before the player on his left raises to 100. Action folds to me in the small blind looking down at a pair of nines. Not really the biggest fan of just flat calling here, so I make it $450, and only the initial raiser calls. Flop comes Queen 6-3, which doesn't seem too bad. I continue with the small bet just like I would with all of my hands, and he makes the call. Turn card is a jack. Now my hand feels a little too strong to bluff, but not strong enough to bet for value, so I check it and he checks back. River comes the 8 of diamonds, and just like on the turn, I'm happy to check it. He checks back again, and once I show my hand, he mucks. Not a ton of action in this one, but I think it's a good idea to occasionally include hands like these because it's just a more realistic representation than the all-ins and bluffs that I normally include. Anyway, at this point in the night, we are joined by a familiar face who you guys might recognize, Mr. Rampage Poker himself, or as I prefer to call him, Ethan. Not long after he sits down, we get involved in a hand where I open King Jack, he calls on my left, and the big blind calls as well. By the way, the big blind is also a vlogger named Karan, so 3 different cameras going to a flop of Queen 8-8. Action checks to me, and I think you can make a case for checking or betting. This time I decide to check, and Ethan checks behind. Turn card is another 8, and Karan checks again. I would sometimes have checked a queen or perhaps a big pocket pair on the flop, so I think starting to bluff now remains credible. So I bet 75, Ethan calls on my left, and we go heads up to a 7 on the river. Obviously no help to my hand, but like I said, I would have plenty of good hands that play this way also. And I think Ethan knows that, so I fire again, this time $300. He starts to think it over, thinks it over some more, and eventually decides on a call. I turn it over, and for some reason King High is no good as he turns over pocket 5s. Good hand, man. You got me. In the next one, the $50 straddle is on. Then Karan raises to 150 before I look down at Ace-Jack offsuit on the button. This hand isn't exactly good enough to call against an early position raise, so I think the best course of action is to mostly fold or sometimes raise. This time I choose the latter and bump it up to 500. Folds back to Karan who makes the call, so here we go. Flop is great. Ace 10-6 with a flush draw giving me top pair. He checks, I bet 300, and he calls. Turn card is not so great, another 10. I would expect him to lead here somewhat often, but he checks instead, and I just check it back, given that this card is much better for him than me. Off to a river, which is the Jack of Hearts, improving me to top 2. Good news if by some chance we were behind Ace Queen or Ace King, but I don't think that's too likely anyway. Now Karan leads out, and it's not a small bet, $2,000. Even though my hand is fairly strong, I don't see him calling with a worse hand if I do raise, so I end up just calling, and we win against pocket 5s. Looks like our battle is still unfinished though, because a few hands later he opens to 75, and I make it 250 with pocket 10s in position. Only he makes the call, so we're off to another heads up flop, this time Jack 3-3 with 2 clubs. He checks, I bet small, and he calls. Turn is another 3, he checks it again, and this time I just check it back, and we're off to a river, which is a 5. This time he leads for $300. Seems like a straightforward call to me, since we beat all the possible bluffs and even some of his value hands like smaller pairs. But unfortunately, we're up against King Jack this time, so can't win them all, I guess. Nice hand. A few minutes later, we look down at a much easier hand to play than pocket 10s, pocket aces. Good news is the straddle is on, so I open the button to 150 before Ethan makes it 700 from the small blind. Action folds back to me, and of course I'm going to raise again, especially when he seems to be in a generous mood, so I make it 1700, and sure enough he calls. Heads up to a somewhat concerning flop of Queen 10-5. He could definitely have flopped a set on this board, but when he checks to me I still think the best play here is to bet. So I throw out an orange chip worth $1,000, and after some thought, he just lets it go. Can't blame him for folding what he later said was pocket 8s, but either way, it's always nice to collect some sweet Rampage money. In the next interesting hand, the straddle is on once again. There's a limp from early position before the next guy makes it 200. Action gets to me in the small blind with some very powerful cards, Ace Queen to be exact, so I raise it to 800, and only the pre-flop raiser makes the call. We go to a flop of King 6-6, which looks like a decent one to me, so I continue with a bet of $500, and he makes the call. I'm probably going to keep betting on a variety of turn cards, but the nice thing about the Ace of Diamonds is it won't have to be a bluff. This is a great board for me to bet big on, regardless of whether I have a good or bad hand, so I fire $3,000 into the middle now. My opponent thinks it over for a while before eventually folding what he later claimed was a king. So if that's the case, you made a great fold, sir. Anyway, moments after this hand, I was asked to stop filming, unfortunately, but there is one more hand to discuss, so stay tuned. Hope you guys enjoyed. So a few things just happened in there that you guys should probably know about. The first of which is that this man here, Mr. Rampage Poker himself, somehow did not win a ton of money. And he played a tournament today and didn't win it. Something is wrong with Florida, man.
It's all fucked up.
Another thing that happened is that they told me to stop filming. So when that happens, I kind of just give up on the day, I guess. I still played about an hour beyond. Can you stop this, man? This is a high quality. Actually, there was one more hand I wanted to share with you guys where someone opened to 150. I re-raised with ace-3 of clubs, and he made the call. We went to a 9-high board with 2 clubs. He checked, and I checked back. The turn was a queen. This time he bet small, and I called. The river brought in the flush, so that's good news, but it did pair the board, so not the absolute best possible hand. Anyways, he continues with a small bet of around a third pot, I think 700. I elected on a small raise to 1700, I believe. After some thought, he just let it go, but it was nice to win one more somewhat sizable hand before getting out of there. And that brings us to the grand totals, which is the last thing you need to know. And those are very good. I was in for 15,000 and cashed out for around a $12,000 or $13,000 profit. Incredible how hot I've been running lately. This upswing is just ridiculous. Happy to take it. Absolutely no complaints, because I know that the opposite could be right around the corner. And of course, when that starts to happen, I'll include it for you guys as well. But until then, I'm enjoying the ride, and Florida's been good to me so far. Thank you guys as always for all the support. If you watched all the way to the end, I really appreciate it. If you gave this video a thumbs up, all that. And let's have a moment of silence for Ethan's $8,000 or something that he lost today. Poor guy. Anyway, until next time, guys, good luck at the tables. Peace.